we're going to break it down. We're going to get into the master key, the principle of care, because this is the most thing that I can ever show you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Not for us, but for them. Welcome, my friends and family. Thank you all for joining.
Many have sought to understand the natural laws that govern our universe. Some say that there are 12, while others, like the great Hermes Trismegistus, know that there are 7.
This is the most important thing that I can ever This is the most important thing that I can ever. This is the most important thing that I can ever. This is the most important thing that I can ever. This is the most important thing that I can ever. This is the most important thing that I can ever. This is the most important thing that I can ever. The most important thing that I can ever show you guys.
People who have studied some variants of occultism may recognize these from Hermes, the messenger of the scribe of the gods known as Cloak. Right? He has other incarnations as well. Binding principles that are immutable. They are laws that are in operation that cannot be changed. Hence, they are hermetically sealed. So, these 7 general principles, they are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, which is a huge one, which we'll be getting into, and gender. At a higher level, at illuminated levels of Freemasonry, which are above 32nd degree, they will give you what the real meaning of the G inside the compasses and square is, and it is the generative principle. It means Genesis, creation, okay? And yeah, you can tie that right back to God. I'm not saying those things are different. And the forms that get created in the physical manifested world are geometric forms. So it is geometry as well. It's all these things. But at the highest level, it's the generative principle. That's what that G really stands for in esoteric Freemasonry, okay? It's called the generative principle because that means to create. It comes from, the word generative comes from Latin. The verb generare, as we've already talked about, means to create. The generative principle is what we create through. And it's lost because people don't care. They don't have care. Hence, it's the lost principle, okay? Here's how it works, folks. What we care enough to put our will behind. Okay? So again, heart, mind, guts. Guts is the will, the action, the masculine principle. That's what gets things done ultimately in the physical domain. What we care enough to put our will behind. And that's driven by the care. That's the generator or the pump that drives the will. Okay? What we care enough to put our will behind is ultimately what gets created or manifested in our world. The world is the way that it is because most people do not care enough, even if they say, they pay lip service, okay, and say that they want things to be different. They don't care enough to actually change it through their actions.
Thanks for joining me. And I just did this last year. This is the update. People are not carrying their cross. You have to understand that we came here to suffer. We came here to do it together. It's the only way we're going to achieve what we're setting out to do in our mind, our body, and our soul.
In order to, like believe in this false system of injustice. And that's the foundation of everything we got going on today. Like, we instantly should be like straightening out problems like this. Like, why aren't we like wrapping up the problems in the world, like homelessness and like, you know, hunger and like, you know, kids that are dying for no reason and like the poisons that they push? Like, why aren't we just like wrapping up these problems? We're not wrapping up these problems because in our back pocket, put away, is our courage, our passion, all of our energy, our power, and our will and desire to do anything. That's the history of humanity. It's a free call.
John the Revelator, the seven seals. John the Revelator,
for the bowls. Seals were broken, truth unfolded, visions of heavens, all foretold. Wrote the book of the seven seals for the bowls, for the bowls.
as the angels fall, heaven's voices tall, the prophecy revealed with a pen of light so real. Tell me, who's that preaching John the Revelator? Who's that teaching John the Revelator? Tell me, who's that speaking John the Revelator?
Spoke the words to break the seal. For the bowl, for the bowl. Feeling the roll of the thunder's toll.
John the Revelator. Tell me, who's that preaching John the Revelator? Who's that teaching John the Revelator? Tell me, who's that speaking John the Revelator?
Spoke the words to break the seals. For the bowl, for the bowl. Feeling the roll of the thunder.
Of the end, not for us, but for them. Welcome, my friends and family. Thank you all for joining in.
We had to go digging back into the crates so that people can see, like, just, you know, how important this particular episode is concerning the mystery schools and the Golden Dawn. This is Dark Journalist.
Around the schools. So they're basically building magnetic center. When I sit down and pick up a book about anthroposophy or the Golden Dawn, it's resonating. You're creating a magnetic center to these types of ideas and working with them. There comes a point where, you know, you look at the field and you say, how would I expand my knowledge on it? So, but, you know, basically you enter into a state of awareness once you start to study it. And so the rest kind of plays out, however it's going to play out. Not everybody ends up joining a mystery school for sure. But it is important to note that the whole mystery tradition is something that goes all the way back to, you know, the Book of the Dead and the Egyptian mystery schools.
Absolutely.
But if you go further back, it goes back to priestess culture.
See how they get you? See how they get you? See how they get you?
It's not a balloon on its way back. It's balloon revenge. So what I want to say when it comes to the mystery tradition, so we're both on the same page, there's a period where the mystery schools in Akhenaten's time, there's a very great challenge, and I would say this is the same challenge that played out in Atlantis between the Belial group and the Amelia's group, where one group wants to hoard the mystery information and use it for dominating effects.
Yes.
And another group wants to move the culture forward. We see it play out over and over again. And in the case
there's
of
many
Akhenaten,
factions,
it was
factions of
because
that.
Egypt was kind of the center of it. are all cultural.
They're all battling and clawing each other for their positions at the top.
He rejected the Amun gods and the whole religion around that and started the Anthem, which was, a sun disk, but represents one god. It's a sun god. Introducing this monotheistic piece created a whole wave of mystery school activity, and they drove him out of power and removed his names from obelisks. We know in all the different Egyptian records, he was just wiped out. So, and Nefertiti was as well. There's just a few remnants that came about, and we're lucky enough to get our hands on them, including the fact that Tutankhamun was his son, and so when that was discovered, we had another whole window on that situation. But in terms of how the Egyptian mysteries play out, it is significant because you have a period there that's like an earthquake again, where this information goes underground. And then
this happens over and over and over.
There's a knowledge that's kept that relates to very ancient information regarding humanity. And it's built upon by individuals. And at a certain point, the story of the mystery schools, if you study the public mystery schools like Anthroposophy, Theosophy, the Casey Warwick, Gurdjieff, or whatever it happens to be, is that there's a group that maintains this. And they're, the schools consist of physical people.
Wow, you
but
see how it cuts
at a certain point,
crazy.
It's an astral group. And they're, they're in the etheric, and they are operating on a spiritual level, influencing physical activities. So we have to keep that in mind as we go tonight, because when we're looking at the spiritual aspect, you have to remember the antagonistic piece. So tonight, when we open up with Steiner and Theosophy and all this piece, you're coming right into the Golden Dawn and Crowley and Mathers and this whole piece and how it gets derailed after starting off as just as promising as something like Anthroposophy or Theosophy. I also want to stress that it's probably crucial the way, we take it for granted maybe that some of these groups, like Anthroposophy, was able to build off of Theosophy and really have something that contributed to the culture and that we can work with now. And whereas the Golden Dawn, we have a lot to be thankful for with them, but they were derailed dramatically from what they were going to be. And again, there was movement inside those mystery schools to get this into the public, which is rare.
What was the name of the priestess school? That's what happened, you were saying, when we blinked out from that.
We went from Pythagoras. Yeah, that was, that's not a priestess school, but it is right after the Egyptian mystery tradition. You get Pythagoras schools. That's a later Egyptian period.
Gary Carpenter wanted to know, mystery schools go back how far?
Oh, they go all the way back to Atlantis. I mean, the advent of humanity, really. So the Atlantean story that Casey tells is that, those Amelia's group initiates and the priestesses kept the information and built these halls of records while we were in this incredible destruction pattern brought about by the technology in Atlantis, as well as weather and earth changes and things like that. So it wasn't just one thing. And the idea that, it's just an earthquake destroyed Atlantis, it's not going to fly. If you look at the mystery school tradition, they're telling you there's a reason, there's something that the Atlanteans did, and that is the misuse of this deeper information. I think that's technology. Steiner is interesting here when we start out with this, because he is somebody who was looking at the ground floor of all this around 1901. And he's seeing the advent.
This is a lifelong study.
You'll notice on the screen I have
ancient drums of sounding stories of the
what on earth is happening.com.
and whispers, truths that forever
Inside of this website, we're going to go look at this particular video that
echoes carry far.
It's in 3 parts. This is part 3 of
Beneath the Midnight
3, Demystifying the Occult. Okay, there's 1 there, and then this is part 2, part 1. Okay, so I would strongly suggest that if you want to know more about the occult, okay, some of the topics that I did not cover here today, that you start your journey over here with a solid base of factual information from a first-hand witness, okay?
Ancient drums of sounding stories of the past. in sacred songs and whispers, truths that forever last. From the mountains to the rivers, echoes carry far. Wisdom of the elders, beneath the midnight star.
For hidden knowledge, for knowledge which has been hidden from people's view. So hey, could that include sciences that people don't really understand? You know, about how energy works in the universe? You know, how we could gain energy from, you know, different methodologies other than internal combustion engines or burning fuel or, you know, things like that? Sure, it contains that. What about knowledge of, you know, different kinds of propulsion systems that people see when they see UFO sightings? Are we talking about the occult there? Are we talking about the occult when we talk about ghost sightings and, you know, possible other dimensions of being? It's all contained in there. All of those things are occult knowledge. You know, it's not just one thing.
Also, I just want to point out that not enough people are visiting this website. What on earth is happening? 1.15 million people is not enough. It's a drop in a bucket. A lot of them are the same people checking it from different sites, different IP addresses. So, you know, you might have 400,000 in real time, which is sad. This information should be available to everybody. And let me see if I can find a particular clip that would be in alignment with what I'm telling you now.
Among the general public. The general public is comfortable with it, okay? The word exoteric comes from the Greek adjective exoterikos. Exoterikos in Greek means external or outside of. So you're not in the inner circle if you're in the exoteric realm. This is the realm of knowledge that is taught to the general population because they don't want people getting at the bullseye. Okay, you look at this as a dartboard or something to that effect. You know, the core of truth lies at the very center at the bullseye. That's what we ultimately want to get to if we're going to transform ourselves and transform our society for the better. The exoteric realm is that which is fed to the great hordes of unwashed masses. You know, simple explanations, unidimensional worldviews and explanations for things. And when we penetrate that, you know, next layer, we get into the occult traditions, the esoteric sciences that get us closer to the very core, to the heart of truth. The esoteric is information which is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interest. Okay? It requires desire for it. You have to want it. You have to be interested enough to want it. You have to care enough to want to take it in. The esoteric is that which is hidden or occulted. It is mysterious. It is beyond the range of ordinary knowledge, experience, or perception. It is that which is communicated only to the initiated. The initiated means those who have begun. I tell people about my former involvement in the dark occult. And these dark occultists called the average human being, one of the very strange terms that they called the average person is the unbegun, which I didn't even understand what it meant when they said it to me repeatedly. The higher knowledgeable people in the dark occult would use this term, not the lower down minions. Okay? It was something that was used by people who directed a lot of these occult groups that I was involved in, these dark occult organizations. And, you know, again, I didn't understand what they meant by that until long after I had completely, you know, ceased my involvement with those groups. The unbegun. It means those who have not started at all. You know, they're still at a zero level of knowledge when it comes to occult information. So what this whole seminar constitutes is a process of initiation. It is helping people to get started, to begin. And that's why my first section was before we begin. You know, it's prior to the initiation process. You know, and then delving into the occult for the first time is a process of initiation. And I ask people all the time, where do you see researchers who are presenting simplified, rudimentary information about occultism in general? You know, you can see people who break down occult symbolism and talk about the occult in general, but where do you see people really talking about what occult information is, what it contains, why it's important to understand, and break it down in a simple and practical way? It's a very rare thing. There's very few people who are willing to come forward and do that, for whatever their reasons are for wanting to maintain their secrecy. But to go back to this, the esoteric realm, that word esoteric comes from the Greek adjective esoterikos, which means within or on the inside of. Okay? So that's what we're really talking about. We're in the inner circle now when we penetrate that veil of the exoteric explanations, and we're getting closer to the hardcore information, closer to that core of truth that we really want to be at. How is occultism different from mysticism? People will often think that these two things are completely the same and the terms can be used interchangeably. But I would say mysticism is a lower level of knowledge or experience or practice than true occultism, than a person who truly understands the occult. Mysticism, as a term, is derived from the Greek verb muo, the first part of mystic or mysticism. The verb muo in Greek means to conceal, similar to the Latin occultare. Mysticism is a loosely defined set of practices, beliefs, traditions, and experiences aimed at human transformation, evolution, and union with the divine. Most forms of mysticism, especially those practiced in modern times, constitute what I would definitely consider an exoteric pathway, which often de-emphasizes knowledge and places large emphasis on emotion, intuition, internal experiences, faith, and perception, much like religion does. This is the main way that mysticism differs from occultism, which conversely comprises a set of esoteric traditions focused on objective knowledge of natural law and the alignment of thought, emotion, and action, resulting in true intelligence, true care, and true will being born within the individual. Okay? We're talking about the actual awakening of the aspects of consciousness and aligning them all in harmony with each other. This is the goal of true occultism. All right? It is the alignment of intelligence, holistic intelligence, okay, logical and intuitive combined. True care, the desire for truth, okay, not just everyday mundane cares. Okay, care with a capital C, as I call it.
And true will.
And true will.
Alignment with the will of creation.
Alignment with the force that expands consciousness, which is love, energy. Alignment with freedom and aligning our behaviors to putting our behaviors into practical action toward true freedom. That's the true will. This is what the goals of real occultism are. Whereas mysticism often serves the self. Mystics, get into things like just meditative practices because they want to provide services to other people, perhaps for monetary value. All kinds of different motivations drive mystical thought. People wanting simply to gain a leg up over their fellow man by certain knowledge or practices.
Tell me who's that riding? John the Revelator. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. He wrote the book of the seven seals. He said, watch with me 1 hour till I go yonder and pray. Till I go yonder and pray. He said, watch with me 1 hour till I go yonder and pray. He said, watch with me 1 hour. And I go yonder and pray. He said, watch with me 1 hour. Till I go yonder and pray. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. He wrote the book of the seven seals. Who is that riding? John the Revelator. Who is that riding?
Monetary value. All kinds of different motivations drive mystical thought. People wanting simply to gain a leg up over their fellow man by certain knowledge or practices, okay, or just improve upon themselves. The occult encompasses a lot more than that, because real, positive, true, light occultism has, again, a deep, objective knowledge of natural law principles at its foundation, and the alignment of the aspects of consciousness as its goal. Okay? So that's how I would define the difference between these sets of practices. I would say that mysticism is an exoteric religion. It's like religious practices or beliefs. Whereas occultism is a body of science. It's a body of objective knowledge that represents esoteric sciences. Okay, I hope that makes the difference clear in most people's minds. Going back to what the occult actually is, I'd like to read a quote by the occultist and Freemason C.W. Leadbeater from 1913. He said, "How shall we define occultism?" And this is his definition, which I think is a pretty good one. The word is derived from the Latin occultus, meaning hidden, so that it is the study of the hidden laws of nature. Since all the great laws of nature are in fact working in the invisible world, far more than in the visible world, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider view of nature than that which is ordinarily taken. The occult is understanding the laws of nature and our connection to them, the self's connection to them. Okay, and as a result, we are aligning all of our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions toward the goal of the evolution, not only of our individuated self, but the evolution of all beings. Okay, that's the goal of the occult and occultism in general. So this is my personal working definition of the occult. When I use the word the occult, this is what I mean by it, when I use the phrase the occult. The occult is a body of science which is not widely known to the general population, consisting of hidden knowledge about the workings of the human psyche and the laws of nature, both the seen laws, meaning the physical laws, the physical sciences, and the unseen laws, meaning the spiritual laws, the laws that govern morality, the laws that govern behavioral consequence. Okay? That is my working definition of what the occult and occultism is in general. And I think it's a pretty simple, practical working definition. So when we're talking about hidden knowledge or occulted knowledge, what knowledge does occultism hide? What kind of knowledge are we actually talking about? Occultism comprises and quote-unquote hides two bodies of knowledge. Now, I put hides in quotes because I just want to make a point here. We can't even look at it such that dark occultists, which I'm going to explain their motivations in a future slide, we can't look at it as the beings who want to keep this information back from people actually try to eradicate it and keep it out of people's hands. That's really not what they do, particularly in the modern world. Their main method of manipulation is dissuasion. They try to dissuade people from looking into these bodies of knowledge by telling them there's nothing to see here, move along. Okay, back to bed, nothing to see here, folks. That's not important, or that's not practical, that can't be used in your everyday life. It's of no benefit to you personally, practically, in your life to learn about that. Okay, or it's some quaint religious belief that has no bearing on anything, that was just made up by people a long time ago, and it's all nonsense. You know, that's the main method of dissuasion that is employed. Okay, and most people fall for it. Most people just, think there's nothing to any of this. I don't need to know about it. That's one of the heights of ignorance, is the phrase, I don't need to know about that. Okay? Just think about that statement right there. The highest height of ignorance is, the pinnacle of all ignorance is, I don't want to know about that. I don't care to know about that. But the people who think they have it figured out say, that's not something I need to know about. What do I need to look into that for? And that's how you know they're gotten. They're already owned. Lock, stock, and barrel. Most people are in that position because they think, all of this is just hokum. All of this is just religion. I tried to explain to somebody who's very concerned about the political degradation and the political process and the direction America and the world in general is headed, politically and financially. And I tried to explain, what really drives this underneath is the occult. Religion drives this. Religious beliefs by the people involved in dark occultism and their religious belief systems is ultimately what's driving the slavery system on earth. And he says to me, I don't need to know anything about that. I don't want to know anything about that. I said, oh, really? That's something you don't need to learn, you don't need to know about. He said, yeah, that's right, because I don't believe in any of that stuff. And I said, you're gotten. Right to them. They already have you. And you don't even understand. Because he said, that's somebody else's belief. How does that affect me? As if somebody else's beliefs can't affect us. And we're immune to what other people believe. Because particularly religious zealots and people who have very deep-seated belief systems based on faith and religion, right? They don't take action in the world based on those religious beliefs, do they? Never. They never do. And those actions would never affect anybody else living in the world. You're completely insulated from those behaviors. It's a child's view. At some point with someone like that, I have to set it down and say, you think you're fine? Well, then go be fine. You know, at that point, because that's a deep, hardcore level of ignorance to be in. Again, that's not really surpassed by much of anything in the way of ignorance, which is something we're going to talk about, the different kinds of ignorance. But to go back to what knowledge occultism actually is comprised of, the bodies of knowledge, the two main bodies of knowledge are knowledge of the self and knowledge of the laws of nature. That's basically it. The knowledge of the self, the knowledge of the human psyche and how the psyche operates, its components, its aspects, its motivations, its desires, etc. You know, what drives us? What's going on at a subconscious level? What's going on at the unseen level? You know, in the recesses of the human psyche, in the psychological realms. This is what is known as the minor knowledge of the occult, the minor arcana. Arcana is a Greek word that means knowledge. Okay, I have a Latin word that means knowledge. I tell people, don't look at this because it's called the minor arcana or the lesser arcana as meaning of lesser importance. That is not what it means. It's just distinguishing it from that which is larger in scope as far as the kind of systems that it actually affects or that it governs. Okay, so you want to look at the part there on the left as this is the small scope of things, the scope of things operating at the individual level, at the individuated domain of the individual self. And then on the right-hand side here, you want to look at the major or greater arcana as simply being that which deals with the macrocosmic world, the world of large things, large systems of nature, okay? The physical laws that, you know, deal with dynamics and motion, gravity, etc. You know, all of the physical dynamics, electromagnetism, etc. But then the major or greater arcana, the world of macrocosmic knowledge, also includes the knowledge of what I call natural law, the moral laws that govern the consequences of behavior of beings that have the capacity for holistic intelligence, or in other words, universal moral law, the laws that govern consciousness. These are the two bodies of knowledge that comprise all occult knowledge. And I ask people when I explain to them the two bodies of knowledge, what is not contained within these two groups? What knowledge that is of any significance, except, you know, the football and baseball stats, okay, is of any significance in the realm of human life? I would say if you control these two bodies of knowledge and you're trying to dissuade people from looking into them, then you have people manipulated from the get-go. You know, they don't have a chance if they don't understand these things. And it's the same thing like in the ancient priest classes that wanted to control the population. The priest king would go up to the top of the pyramid and tell people, hey, the great sky beast is getting ready to eat the sun. And it was an eclipse, and it was a solar eclipse. And he's going to eat the earth next if you don't bow down and give me total power. You know, and if you accept me as the intermediary between the gods and yourself, then, you know, in a few minutes, the sun will come back and, you know, life will continue on earth. And it worked beautifully because these people had no knowledge of the macroscopic laws of nature. They didn't understand the physical sciences and astronomy in particular back then. You know, they didn't understand how that motion worked and how that phenomenon worked. So that's how a differential in power can be created when you have a differential in knowledge present. A major point to keep in mind, and this is something people constantly take a unidimensional viewpoint regarding. So many people want to say, oh, all the occult is bad. It's knowledge, folks. It's not something that is universally good or universally evil. It's knowledge and what we do with it. That's it. It's a tool. It's a tool set. Would you say astronomy is good or evil? Would you say mathematics is good or evil? Would you say biology is good or evil? It's knowledge. That's all the occult is. It's knowledge. The consciousness of the wielder of that knowledge determines whether it's used for good or evil. You know, so if I'm trying to create genetically engineered food products so I could sell people poison to undermine their health, just so I could make more money because I could grow more crops on less land, I'd say that's a pretty dastardly use of science, in my opinion, in my worldview. You know, but science of biology and genetics is just knowledge. What we then do with them determines whether it's good or bad. The same for the occult, and that's how we have to look at it. The occult is a double-edged blade, however. There is, again, a light side to it and a dark side to it, and it's all dependent on how that knowledge is used. So the knowledge contained within the occult sciences can be used for good, which I consider the uplift of consciousness, or it can be used for evil, the manipulation of consciousness, the control of people, and ultimately putting people into bondage and slavery. To clearly distinguish between these different usages of occult knowledge, I refer to occult knowledge that is employed toward the expansion of human consciousness and morality as light occultism or magic. Now, some people won't make this distinction. They'll say it's all one body of information. I'm going to just group it all in. And it's a very dangerous proposition because those people, again, take a very unidimensional approach, and they usually take the approach it's all bad, and therefore none of it should be looked into. You know, religious people take this approach. It's why they don't understand the occult. Many New Agers take this approach. Now, they say, if it's not pure spiritualism or pure spiritual mysticism, then I don't want anything to do with it. I consider that's dark stuff or sorcery. It's a very unidimensional and naive and childish view of this body of science. Okay? So, that's what I call light occultism. When you use this hidden knowledge toward the uplift of humanity, toward the expansion of consciousness and the expansion of morality. So, the other way of using it is for manipulation, control, and the suppression of consciousness. And if this knowledge is used in that methodology, then I refer to it as dark occultism or sorcery, is a perfectly acceptable term for it. Thus, the practitioners of light occultism could be referred to as light occultists, magicians, magi, light builders, or light workers. All terms that I feel could be used interchangeably as long as we're looking at it within the context of occult knowledge as I have defined it in my working definition. And you could look at the practitioners of dark occultism as dark occultists, sorcerers, dark builders, or dark workers, all terms that I feel are perfectly acceptable and interchangeable with each other. So why has such knowledge been hidden from humanity? Well, we'll look at why each set of occultists hide this information. Okay, first let's look at why dark occultists hide it, then at a later point we'll look at why even light occultists sometimes conceal this knowledge. Dark occultists have deliberately hidden occult knowledge in order to create and maintain a power differential between those who hold such knowledge and those who are ignorant of it. We've already been talking about that. And through this mechanism, all power ultimately flows to them because knowledge applied is power in the world. Knowledge is not itself power, it is the potential for power. When you apply knowledge, then you can gain power. If you don't have it, you're completely disempowered from the very beginning. Talk about because they actually wanted to use it for manipulative purposes. They wanted to learn about the archetypal ways that symbolism could be used. And somebody who knew them told me that was why they came. And I said, hey, let them understand it, because if everybody understands it, the playing field is level. Then nobody can use it for those dark purposes because you're empowered by knowledge. And if you see how they're using it, you say, oh, I know how that's being used. That's not going to have an effect on me. Alchemists also referred to an all-important agent, which is necessary for the transmutation of, quote, base metals into, quote, gold, or in other words, base modes of consciousness into higher forms of consciousness. This agent has been referred to as the elixir of life, the philosophical powder, and the quintessence. But by far, the most well-known name for this agent of transformation was the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone represented man himself at the beginning of the process of self-mastery. It also represented the universal spark, the divine spark or divine essence, which is present in everything that has been created, and thus also in the alchemist himself. The great work of alchemical transmutation is accomplished in 3 phases, which I'm going to cover briefly here. These 3 phases of transformation in alchemy are all explained allegorically. The first phase was called nigredo. Nigredo means blackening in Latin. This is a state of putrefaction, of breaking something down, corruption, dissolution, individuation, descent into matter, descent into the undifferentiated and into chaos. It represents the soul's descent into the material plane and the suffering experienced in the physical world. Alchemists often represented the soul at this stage as the element of salt, because salt is crystallized, it's hardened, it's fixed, just like an ego that is resistant to change. And I would suggest this is the state the world is in. We're in the state of nigredo, of blackening, of corruption, of putrefaction. And believe me, the vast majority of the people on this world are the salt. And I don't mean salt of the earth in the good way. They're crystallized, they're hardened, they're resistant to change, and they need to be dissolved and broken down mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
of all of this bullshit they have been selling us.
The Hermetists have never sought to be martyrs, and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips, while the, quote, heathen raged noisily about them, in their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect who had advanced along the path. I think you could hear the kind of elitist attitude or spirit embedded in this, but I do also understand what they're saying. At certain times in history, you would have been tortured for presenting some of these truths about the reality of our world. And so then some Hermeticists took this approach of just keep your mouth closed and let the people who don't want to receive this suffer. Again, I personally do criticize that attitude, particularly in the world today. Maybe if more people would have stepped up, taught this to more people, and they would have gained the courage to teach it to a wider audience, we wouldn't have gone down the path we did as a species. Again, the Hermetic tradition was also a growing out of, a continuation of the Cometian tradition that was practiced in, again, later Egypt and then was passed into Greece. I'm going to read some Hermetic philosophy from a book known as the Kybalion. I know a lot of people debate that pronunciation and like to call it the Kybalion, but I see that as far too modern Anglicized, and I like to pronounce it how it probably would have been pronounced in the ancient Greek language, in which there was no short Y sounds. You know, it would have been a long I sound, Kybalion, and every syllable would have been pronounced. Again, people can debate that. It's kind of a splitting of hairs, but I prefer what would have been closer to the ancient pronunciation. The Kybalion states, there is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings which have come down to us over the tens of centuries which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the, quote, scribe of the gods, again, Thoth in the Egyptian tradition, Hermes in the Greek tradition, in the Hermetic tradition, he was known as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great one. Trismegistus means great 3 times over, or thrice great. He was great in his thoughts, in his emotions, and in his actions. His aspects of his consciousness were unified. Some people look at, he was the original alchemist in the Cometian tradition, the creator god Ptah. Okay? So, Hermes Trismegistus, the quote, scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. And I would agree with that. Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have been promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race may be traced back to Hermes Trismegistus. Even the most ancient teachings of India, he's referring to the Vedas here, undoubtedly have their roots in the ancient Hermetic teachings. So the person who wrote the Kybalion, or the group of people who wrote the Kybalion, are stating that it is their belief that the Hermetic teachings are the roots of modern occultism. I tend to look at ancient Cometian philosophy as being even older than even the Hermetic tradition, and perhaps shamanism being even more than that. In this section, I'm going to go for about another 15 minutes, and then we're going to break for lunch. More from the Kybalion. The life work of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting the great seed truth, which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather than to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. Again, he's trying to make it clear that Hermetic tradition was a collection of teachings, a body of knowledge, not one specific dogmatic religion or one set of teaching. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by Hermes have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men in each age who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. They're describing occultism. They hid the truth from those who did not really want it or they knew would not use it wisely. In other words, their motto or their dictate was no pearls before swine. Okay? I see it as kind of an elitist ideology, and I'll tell you why I don't necessarily agree with it. They're going to talk about the people who didn't agree with this approach. In the modern day, I'm certainly one of them. Now, perhaps in those times things would have been different, but I'll tell you what, with the world on the brink of collapse and chaos the way it is now, the likes of which humanity may never have seen, the likes of the kind of chaos we're likely to see in our lifetimes possibly, I don't even think some of the old Hermetic teachers would have advocated secrecy in today's world. They would have advocated taking this knowledge and propagating it as widely and as freely as possible. At least I hope so. I hope they would have taken that position. But that's the position I'd take anyway. They followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who were ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There have always been a few initiates in each generation in the various lands of the earth who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world when the light of truth grew dim,
and became clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter. There were always a few to tend faithfully to the altar of truth, upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men have never sought popular approval, nor numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth, or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. Now, I don't make any bones about that. Yeah, there's a few people who are very prepared and ready to receive truth, and if it's presented to them, they're going to accept it readily. Few people are already prepared through knowledge and open-mindedness and humbleness enough to simply open up their mind and heart and receive truth. Not in this world. I know that's not how it happened for me. I suffered beating the red-hot sword with the iron hammer in a forge of suffering. That's what got me to finally wake up and break my ego down. Hardcore fire of purification did it for me. But I speak this information to try to explain to people you don't have to go through that process. If you will listen to wisdom and truth, then you don't have to go through that deep level of suffering. But most people seem to want it. To go back to this quote, these teachers reserved the, quote, strong meat for men, while others furnished the, quote, milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns instead of casting them before the materialistic, vulgar swine who would trample those teachings in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those ready to receive it. Their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism, quote, the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. Now, people could say, well, I have stated in the past, I'm putting out my work for the people who are ready to become teachers themselves, and they are ready to receive it. I've made no bones about the fact I can't make anybody take this information if they don't want to hear it, or if they're not interested. That desire, that I symbolically represent by this orange color throughout this presentation, that sacred desire force that operates to take the person up out of the base instincts and just living, this see the world, what you see is what you get type thing, never penetrating the surface, never looking any deeper, never going into the deeper realms of the human subconscious and the human mind, then I can't make them look at that. There's no way to make somebody do that work because that's internal work that has to be done upon themselves. I can only act as an assistant to that process of transformation through providing some information and some support. But I don't agree with this elitist attitude of don't put the information out there because these people don't want to hear it, which seems to be the spirit in which this is said. I take the approach, again, of egalitarian aspect or egalitarian mentality on two fronts. One, when it comes to all of our natural rights, we are equal under that law, under that natural law. And two, I believe in egalitarianism when it comes to information being presented, information which we need, vital information which we need to make truly informed decisions in life. That information should be provided freely and openly. So I don't agree with this hermetist's attitude of don't cast pearls before swine. I'm going to speak information to everybody. Who's ready to take it will take it, and that will be their karmic choice and consequence. And who ignores it will do so at their own peril.
So for part 2.
Theosophy. He joins Theosophy, and he becomes a favorite among Theosophists in Germany, so much so that Annie Besant, who's taken over for Blavatsky, who's passed away, she says, look, just run the German Theosophical chapter, and that's a big chapter, so they really trusted Steiner dramatically. When we look at the period just preceding this, we're getting into a period where the mystery schools are trying dramatically to introduce these deeper themes as a way to prevent humanity from falling under the boot of scientific materialism and separating off.
And that was the point of the Golden Dawn when they started out.
Where they just worship the technology. And at the same time, the religions are going through a transformation because it seems like the message is old. Now, here's the thing that I understand about religions. The core principles are everlasting. But, if you have stories on top about shepherds and, Moses and things like that, once you hit the 19th century, it seems very backdated. So they're under threat as well. And also, a lot of how they taught things becomes almost stale. It becomes rote for people, really invigorating. So the mystery schools who are connected directly to the religious spiritual traditions, they decide we're going to let this out and invigorate everything, basically. But they also know
every major religion has mystery schools behind it. Every major religion has mystery schools behind
it. When we
it.
get around to Blavatsky, it's very interesting because Blavatsky's a trade-off by the mystery schools. They decide after a lot of going back and forth and helping mediums out and creating this whole craze for spiritualism in America in the 1850s and 60s, that there's a battle going on between the schools about how much to let out. And then what's happening is there are all these mediums coming forward, and they are getting these messages about life after death and things of these nature. And inside the mystery schools, there's a battle taking place because the idea is they wanted to inform the culture about the spiritual afterlife. But what's happening is the culture is saying, hey, the Summerland, life after death is exactly like life here. And this causes a big problem for what they want to do. Basically, they feel like they're giving out the wrong message. They're misleading people. And people are getting hung up on that and not about this whole other thing. And then there's reincarnation to consider and all these other pieces. So Blavatsky is dramatic in that she is able to bring all this information together, and she does in a book called Isis Unveiled. She founds the Theosophical Society with Emma Britton and Henry Olcott, 1875.
A big deal, because she was a woman at the time.
Something about her, and it's something that Steiner said, is that she had the mediumistic talents that the Egyptians and the Greeks had, and it hadn't been seen in a long, long time, the level that she had it. So she was able to enter into the spiritual realm and bring information and insights back. So when she puts out this information in the 1870s, it's an explosion inside the mystery schools because many of them don't understand where she got it. So she attempts to join the American mystery schools, and those schools based on, basically in America, it's a crisscross that's going on between the political side and the mystery schools. They're wrapped up dramatically, according to Steiner. They, in fact,
back
form
then
a single
and today, correct.
When you enter into political agreements, the mystery schools are represented, both the right-hand side and the left-hand side. Although the right and left political parties don't, that's not what we're referring to.
But that's a big part of it, too.
Around the mystery schools, the right-hand path are the group that's trying to move the culture forward. The left-hand path has gradations, but it is generally, a selfish movement. It's like the selfish wizard.
Satanism, as defined by Mark Passio.
There's really interesting, as I was doing this, I enjoy Fortune's work so much. She was somebody who was around in the aftermath of this in the 40s, the 30s, and 40s.
Selfishness is the first tenet.
She really understood it. She got it quite well. Here's a few things that I think that she refers to that give us an idea about how we can think of the formation of mystery schools. Quote, that's from a book called Esoteric Orders.
This is really good.
The great mystery schools have existed from the dawn of consciousness in the human race. They are neither fabrications or the imagination frauds to dupe the superstitious, nor existent solely on the inner planes. Outside Europe, they have flourished unchecked for time immemorial. Revered and feared by the peoples they guided, sometimes fallen upon evil days as the degenerate voodoo schools of Africa. This is interesting because, there's a gigantic voodoo juju movement that spreads out among from Africa to all these different islands. So she's suggesting that's kind of a mystery school gone wrong. Sometimes retaining a noble tradition, as in certain parts of India and Chinese schools, but always accepted as a part of the racial life, just as are the monastic orders among ourselves. In Europe, however, the state religion, which should have been the custodian of the mysteries, became instead the prosecutor. Now, this is very interesting. This unhappy state of affairs came about owing to the political expediency placed upon men in high positions who did not hold high degrees in the mysteries. So you get these kind of backwards leaders giving us this. So she goes on to basically say that there's a difference between how you set up a right hand and a left hand initiate, although they both share the same type of knowledge. And this is part of the problem because on the left-hand side, we're going to find out tonight that somebody who operated on kind of all sides of this, Crowley, I'm going to show you an interesting Aleister Crowley tonight. Here's somebody who knew everything about the right-hand path and exercised the left-hand path. It's very tricky to consider. Okay, the groups and societies should be looked upon as outposts of the mysteries. and it is the aim of every true teacher to pass to his pupils through the hands as speedily as may be and send them on to the order where he himself received his training. So it is with the occultists. The great ones are not easy to find, and the ones that are accessible are either among the smaller fry or are guides to bring the seeker to the mystery schools where they themselves receive their training. So then she goes on to talk about lesser mysteries and fraternities, and so
right, and how it waters down the whole way.
What we need to get from that is that once somebody goes down the course of getting into mystery knowledge, they take it upon themselves. So there's a certain amount that teachers can do for them, and there's a certain amount that the order does for them. But at a certain point, you're on your own, and so your discretion, what you do with the information, becomes very much a personal.
Yeah,
choice.
it comes down to intention.
You make the wrong choices.
Yeah, if you got bad intentions,
you make the right choices.
Right. Work with the universe or against the universe.
That's going to
so now he's going to cross over. He's going to get into the Golden Dawn here.
With Samuel Little, McGregor Mathers, and Golden Dawn, as we take a look at it here tonight on the special
good stuff,
man. Mysteries. Everyone watching the Dark Journal show. Just a great group of you out there tonight. And in the second half of tonight's program, I mentioned we're going to be taking your questions as well on all this. Miss Olivia, before I go any further.
John Mondry says, I've been waiting for this topic to come up because I am convinced that X is more than a steganography. Anything involving the letter X includes some kind of magic spell for control.
Wow, well, that's really true. This whole idea about spells, we should really bring it down to earth because, everything on some level is a spell, right? So when somebody really wants something, there's a kind of a magnetism to that right off the bat. And so we all experience spells of one kind or another. When they got kind of massive communication and massive technology behind it, and then you had black magicians behind that, they were doing widespread group magic. And so, a lot of people would look back on it and say, well, it seemed like, during the Kennedy assassination or something, we were under a dark cloud, and people, would have these stories. Well, after 9/11, it just felt like there was some, very kind of evil thing in the air. And before that, Hitler, we had World War II, and people look back at that. It seems like the ultimate occult ritual, in a sense. But these people, it's interesting to me, because when you get to the mystery schools in the 19th century, this is before we get into the World Wars. So there's information on the inside that, really bad time is coming in for humanity, and that these forces are getting unleashed. And it's almost like there's rapid activity to help humanity do battle with it. At a certain point, if you look at the information that comes out from 1875, say, to 1925, 50-year period, the whole, thing around spirituality, mystery traditions, reincarnation, psychic activity, it's all out there. Suddenly Atlantis is, top object of study for people around esoteric information. So that's new. I mean,
this is important, guys. He's tying it all together.
And we have periods that this harkens back to, like John Dee and people like that. But, there's a big cutoff there at a certain point. And then it seems like there's an incredible upturn of activity right there in that period. And then there's a setup period beforehand where we get this incredible mediumistic craze. And that's the mystery schools experimenting with certain individuals and bringing them public and saying, how do people accept information? So, in some sense, we have individual inspiration. We see people fulfilling their karma, their destiny by coming forward. But on the other hand, they're being helped along by this group. And figuring out who the groups are is very interesting. But we have public schools to help us. If you go back in the 14th century, out of the blue, all of these strange reports were coming out about the Rosicrucians, and that there's a secret ancient group that's coming forward with information, giving us a new enlightenment. It's an echo. There's a school there that is ready, and they're getting their message out through different people. And in order to do it properly and avoid persecution, it has to be done through groups and individuals in a particular fashion. So I think that we want to keep that in mind as we go, which is why when we get to Golden Dawn, it becomes controversial almost from day one. But, they have some incredible individuals attracted to it right off the bat. Now, Golden Dawn, directly relates to this show in a sense, because this is the X Steganography series, and it's all about steganography that I observed when I was looking originally into technology issues, about advanced technology programs that would disappear, and all of these X designations I started to realize became associated with projects and how to track projects, and were a kind of steganography hiding in plain sight for those who knew, the initiates who knew. When I took it back further in time, I started to find the X steganography through things like Theosophy, and if you went further back into Rosicrucian, medieval times, and then you go back to the Pythagoras schools, Akhenaten, the Mayan, the whole thing, the X steganography was there. So St. Andrew's Cross, just showing up over and over again in history, and not with any, random quality. This is something that was placed in different spots so that these initiates would realize when something came forward like this. In the middle of studying about steganography, I ran across someone who's referred to as the father of steganography. It's Johannes Trithemius, who was an abbot.
Nobody's ever heard of him.
16th century in Germany. And he has a very interesting story, and it's really where the Golden Dawn story comes from as well, because we're going to find that the things that he hid, they're going to rediscover some 300 years later. Trithemius was young and inspired, and has a very strange history of really deep esoteric spirituality. So, he was traveling. Some of the background on him, just like the most basic bioactivity. Traveling from the university to his hometown in 1482, he was surprised by a snowstorm and took refuge in a Benedictine abbey. He decided to stay and was elected abbot in 1483 at the age of 21. Now, this is odd, too. His age, the way he came there.
Yeah, just happens to stumble upon it.
Yeah. Wasn't it just like a year later?
It's led there.
Yeah, he lands there when he's 20, and then he turns 21.
That's crazy.
Trithemius wrote extensively as a historian, starting with the Chronicle of Sponheim and culminating in a 2-volume work on the history of the abbey. His work was distinguished by mastery of the Latin language. Now, they recognize something special about him, and he's given this incredible position and access to all of these sacred materials and sacred books. Now, what happens with him, he becomes what they call a famous builder of libraries for them. And in this process, somewhere along the line, he learns all about magical incantations and ceremonial magic. And when he goes to perform it, he finds that he's unusually good at it. And he realizes that he wants to write a book about these magical experiences where, there are holy entities and there's all these different things happening with him. But he also realizes that the people inside the church, if he lets this out, he will become persecuted. So he decides to utilize his knowledge to develop a steganography system. But in fact, what he draws upon, and what he says is the Greeks actually had the best version of steganography. And he would just describe it simply as a page within a page. And there's a difference. There's all kinds of cryptography and things along this line. The difference with steganography is it's always hidden in plain sight. It's something that's out there in the open that somebody, if they looked at it, who wasn't initiated, wouldn't know what it was.
Exactly.
And there's a number of examples of it. And by the time we get to Alice in Wonderland, that's a steganographic book. So Trithemius puts out these different books eventually. This is what we get. He actually describes the system of steganography. And he uses these books as a way to promote the magical incantations and things and the different rites and rituals. And he puts out some remarkable information. But some of it isn't published till substantially after his death. This is a picture of him as a younger man. I say younger there because he's younger than some of the older shots we have of him with no beard and gray hair. But what happens is the scrolls that he puts away dealing with ceremonial magic kind of go through this process where they're hidden away. And then there's a couple of researchers who will form the foundation of the Golden Dawn. And basically the story is going to go that in an antique shop, they're going to run across these scrolls that he secreted away. And the newly ciphered documents provide the basic structure of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They're written in English from right to left, using a key first described in the 15th century by German Benedictine abbot Johannes Trithemius, who was a personal instructor for two of the most notorious magicians, Agrippa and Paracelsus. This is interesting. There's a school of thought that he left the scrolls and that they got translated into English, and then they were supposed to be deposited for these people to find at a certain point, and that the mystery schools let them out directly. Inside the scroll, and this person found it now in an antique store, inside the scroll is information about someone in Germany who can unlock the key for them, who is part of one of the mystery schools. So we can consider it the greatest coincidence that this person just happened to walk in there and get it, or we can say, well, maybe it was placed there for them. And whatever the case is, it ends up in the hands of Mathers. Now, Mathers is interesting because he is somebody who is a polyglot, and he is, a master translation person. And he's just basically given to philosophical endeavors and magical practices. So he is finding, through his connection with these libraries, all of these old versions about the keys of Enoch and things of this nature. And he is interpreting them and bringing these books, which have been hidden in medieval libraries for centuries, out to the public. And then, boom, this scroll and the whole Trithemius ceremonial magic lands in his lap, along with this direct connection to a woman in Germany. Now, this is interesting. There's a couple of different academic papers. There's a lot of books about this character, but I found one academic paper written by Christopher McIntosh at the University of Exeter. It just has a couple of insights about this person. And so he starts off with this and says, of all the mysteries connected with the origins of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, none is more teasing than the riddle of the so-called Fräulein Sprengel letters. For readers less familiar with the Golden Dawn conception, it might be helpful to recapitulate the basic facts as we know them. The story goes that in 1887, Dr. William Westcott, a London coroner, he's one of the people who founded the Golden Dawn, and Freemason with strong esoteric leanings, came into the possession of a manuscript written in a cipher based on Benedictine abbot Johannes Trithemius. When deciphered, the manuscript was found to contain skeleton descriptions of rituals written in English, apparently stemming from an order with a grade structure similar to the Rosicrucians. And he goes a little bit deeper here about Kabbalah and all the rest. What's interesting is Anna Sprengel is the name of the initiate, and she basically says if you come into possession of the scrolls, it means you're ready to get in contact. We've got things going. Now, the story goes for the Golden Dawn that Mathers is the one who gets in touch, and that he becomes connected directly to this German Rosicrucian mystery school. Now, I have to say that it seems like Germany and France and England are major centers for the mystery schools in this period, and America, of course. But Germany shows up over and over again regarding the Rosicrucians, which makes me wonder if that original explosion which happened there in Germany with the Rosicrucians, if that didn't just continue on and they built the schools out. In any case, when we get to a point with the Golden Dawn where Mathers has taken this on, he actually is very interesting because he has an initiatory background with the Masons. And so he's taking on this whole other level. Now he's creating an order where he will initiate people into the order. Now, what's interesting is the first person that he initiates into the order is his wife. And this is interesting too, because here we have Blavatsky founding Theosophy, Emma Britton is there. So you have two women and one man, Volcott. And Besant will take over for Blavatsky. So there's a lot of women coming to the fore in these groups. And suddenly we have Mathers, getting initiated by a woman in this German mystery school, and then him making a woman the first initiate of the Golden Dawn system. That's pretty interesting when we get to this level, because we're seeing that women are playing a dramatically bigger role, and this may be part of what is taking place and what's going to need to take place in order to set the tone for the future. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We're here tonight going deep on the mystery scene.
He's definitely going deep, guys. Listen, I don't know too many people that have gone out and researched and put these type of content together on this type of level. And this individual, Dark Journalist, he has a website. There'll be links in the description. His work is extremely interesting and something that, if you want to know how things are playing out today, you need to apply yesterday to today and what they plan for the future today. So all those things have to factor in. And this guy, man, he does such an excellent job putting it together.
The Mystery of the Golden Dawn, and McGregor Mathers, and Aleister Crowley, and the whole gang. We're going to be taking your questions in part 2 of tonight's program. I'm going to see how much I can get through this tonight. I sense we're going to have a part 2 with this as well. How are you doing?
Good. As Cher said, that mystery group in Germany was the Kempton group, which initiated Steiner, among other things.
Right.
And the Philip K. Dick Film Festival says Steiner ran an OTO chapter before Crowley took it over.
Well, that's a tricky one, yeah. He was asked about that, and what he said literally was that he didn't have anything to do with the OTO, and that because of the way that all the groups were overlapping at the time, they asked him for some technical purpose if he would could identify himself that way for like a limited thing while they were getting a new person in. So Steiner never considered himself associated with OTO, although Crowley did. And Steiner, look, he turned his nose up at theosophy. Can you imagine? He's not going to work with black magicians.
Right.
But it is interesting because Steiner talks in very realistic terms about the groups that are, working with Arma.
Both Steiner and Casey turned their nose to these type of organizations. Even the organization that was created around Casey, ARE, was also infiltrated by the CIA. And, you could do the research and see all that good stuff. But, when he talks about these groups, man, he's right on point. They were overlapping. There were so many, and everybody wanted to, host the latest seance or the latest party or the latest tarot card reading. And this is where a lot of the materials and the books come into play. And we're going to talk about that, so stay tuned with that.
Bringing in this whole black magic piece and how they're on the same level. This is very important on our side, I think, to consider this. But, spiritual science and anthroposophy, the people who rise in the mystery school traditions under Rosicrucian mysteries, the people in the other schools are on the same level of knowledge. It's just that their application is different. One group is using it for a more unselfish purpose. They're dedicated to the cause. They're dedicated to the whole purpose behind the Rosicrucians, the Rosicross, and the religious impact that it has.
Yes, in fact, they thought they were very just in their actions, all Rosicrucians. I was involved with researching them rather intensely for a little while. I will say this, intention is everything, and I'll say it over and over and over again. If you have selfish intentions with any of this stuff, the results are going to be bad. In fact, I think that there's a much more simpler formula that can be read directly from the 8 principles of natural law. That's why I presented that to you first. But this is going into detail, so I want him to get this out, but I want to also point out that, if it was used for bad intentions, usually the outcomes were bad, the results, there wasn't pots of gold at the end of the rainbows for people that were practicing with ill intentions. And that's going to continue to be the result today with what's playing out today in today's world. But yeah, Casey, Edgar Casey, he literally, if someone were asking him questions while he was under trance and their intentions weren't correct, he would actually get physically ill. And, there was all kinds of different, situations where that occurred, where he, became physically ill as a result of partaking in any kind of way. So,
spiritual impact on the culture. And the other group, as I said, it's not necessarily that left-hand groups are evil, but there are levels inside the left-hand groups that operate completely in the intention. So, but groups themselves who are on the left don't necessarily have to be. They can become dedicated in a selfish fashion. So, however you'd want to rank that. But
I don't know about that. I'd have to argue with you, DJ. I don't
Steiner
think that's a
himself
real
said
thing.
that there were gradations on the left-hand path, and at a certain point, there's deep black. That's tricky. That's very, very tricky. But what's interesting is somebody who comes in to this whole Golden Dawn piece, who thinks that he is going to bring Rosicrucian angels and everything else, is Aleister Crowley. I kid you not. This is where this episode is going to take an interesting turn, because we're going to see Crowley take a few interesting turns. And now there's two.
Yeah, again, this is Dark Journalist. His links are in the description.
I'm going to go through these women in some detail, but almost all of them are involved in the theater. This is interesting too,
and still are today.
We remember with the Emma Britton information that so much that Emma Britton went through. She was an actress. She was somebody who was basically like a Broadway star, and they brought her all over Europe doing these different things, but she was being used in the background as a somnambulist medium. There's a piece there, there's a network that goes through acting. There's a network that goes through literary worlds. There's a network that goes through the political piece, and this is where all the mysteries take us. So there's the first initiate, Moina Mathers, and she's very interesting. I'll tell you what's fascinating about her. She's clairvoyant, and she is, she has this very interesting Gurdjieff connection, which is her brother is Henry Bergson, and Bergson will become a very notable Gurdjieff student. So there's a lot of crossover here. I'm also going to mention that Mathers was approached by Madame Blavatsky, and she said, I know what you're doing in the Western tradition that's informing you. We can merge forces and you can go further. But Theosophy was already on its way, and you would think that Mathers would have done it, but he didn't. So that's another thing that might have saved what he was doing. Moina is fascinating in her own right, in that she moves the Golden Dawn forward, and with her own abilities becomes basically a strong leader inside the group. Someone else I think who's notable here is Florence Farr, and I'm going to describe that there's an Isis Urania temple inside of Golden Dawn. And so she's a very famous actress of the period, and when she takes it on, it leads to other people in acting becoming very involved in Golden Dawn ceremonial magic. And she's actually one of the leading actresses of the day. But, there's a whole piece there where W.B. Yeats becomes involved in a leader of Golden Dawn. So suddenly, from being just this strange thing that gets founded with the scroll, and Mathers, who spends all his time at the university library, now it's spreading out, and it's going through different parts of the very, very interesting pieces of London. This is all, a lot of it's emanating out of London. In the middle of all this, this woman becomes interested in it, and her name is Anne Herneman, but she's a wealthy tea heiress. In fact, her grandfather created the tea bag, and she will fund Mathers and his wife to create a much larger version of the Golden Dawn, and in fact they do. So those are the foundational aspects. So basically, what we've got up to this point is, Trithemius leaves behind these scrolls, and then they get translated into English and left in an antique store. And then the founders of the Golden Dawn come across them, along with information linking them to a mystery school in Germany. And then Anna Sprengel is this mystery figure who initiates Mathers into the mysteries in Germany. And he becomes basically their representative. Now, that's all Rosicrucian based training, the whole thing that we have for the Golden Dawn, and the thing that they are trying to communicate with on their side, and that they think they are dealing with directly, is the Great White Brotherhood, which is the same group, which is basically the top mystery school. And I think when you look at this, you know, we're seeing that there are different individuals being...
On a side note, the Great White Brotherhood has nothing to do with race or creed. It's not white as in skin color. It's white as in purity of intention. And it dates all the way back to the creation of the pyramids and their original purposes. This information can be found out from, you know, Steiner. You know, they all write about the White Brotherhood. Nazi Germany took the Aryan White Brotherhood thing to a whole nother level. You know, so they actually use eugenics and everything else. But when we're talking about this Great White Brotherhood, there's been a lot of modern day mystery school talk concerning it. Okay, you could research that very easily. Casey spoke about it. Who's the other guy? Casey was one of them. Steiner spoke about it. I can't think of it. I can't think of it. It was Casey, Steiner, and the other main one, John Peniel. John Peniel. Yeah.
Keys for things, you know, given keys for things. So in Theosophy, as Steiner put it, you know, true initiators stood at the cradle of Theosophy. So, you know, Blavatsky is working with initiates.
Yeah, that's the law of one, John Peniel. That's a bunch of garbage too. It's just that's all plagiarized stuff. So, I mean, I'm sure that there was mystical stuff going on with it all, but they basically plagiarized most of their material from existing knowledge that was already put out there. Just saying.
We're just trying to create something. And we get so many things I point out about Theosophy, you know, like meditation. The first cremation was done on American soil. Psychic activity, the idea of reincarnation, all these things, you know, yoga becomes popularized by the Theosophical Society. But look at Golden Dawn. You know, think of like the Rider Waite deck and ceremonial magic and all these different things.
And that's how we got here, guys.
As a result of their influence. And then we start to get a piece of like, oh, we can see that the schools did impact the culture dramatically. But along the way, you know, things got really messed up because many of the groups, and I think in this case Mathers, who's somebody we're going to get into a little bit more, have some interesting...
Can I chime in for a second?
Oh, yeah.
So Josh says that Mathers, as in Marshall Mathers' great-great-great-grandpa, according to Eminem's mom's book. For reals. And Skinny Deform says, have you guys seen Eminem's most recent album cover? Tons of Freemason symbolism.
Absolutely.
That, of course, is
absolutely.
The music industry.
That's pretty funny. Well, this is the interesting thing, which is Eminem is Marshall Mathers. But, you know, that thing about the book and his mother, if you want to send it to me, send it to admin@darkjournalist.com. That would be helpful because Mathers has a very interesting ancestral connection to Gregor Mathers. You know, he's a relative of Alice Little, as I pointed out. That's going to become important as we roll this out. But if he's directly related to Eminem, yeah. I'm going to be interested in that.
Nothing surprises me anymore.
Just to give us some idea about Mathers, we can see him, you know, in that Egyptian garb there. We can see him in his military uniform, and then as an older man teaching. What's interesting about Mathers is he has kind of interpersonal problems. He's not the best leader type, but he's incredibly talented and earnest. And this is the interesting thing. What happens is, there's a great letter that I was looking at earlier, which is, you know, and once in a while Crowley does this, but I was reading Crowley talking about Mathers, and it was like, well, Mathers lost his moral compass, and that's how he lost the leadership of the Golden Dawn. And it's always great whenever it comes up with Crowley, like, you know, if he says someone's losing their moral compass. Okay, let's just get some idea of how the Golden Dawn saw itself and how Mathers.
This is where he breaks it
recreated
down,
mystery
the
tradition
actual,
in the 19th century.
like what it looks like.
Masonic's design stood at the core of the organizing principle of the order. The order, Golden Dawn, applied explicitly to the outer order, to which anyone could apply. They taught the basis of esoteric philosophy using the Kabbalistic tree of life. Each level being a grade, membership started outside the tree. The first level of sphere followed. Now this is interesting because there's a group inside Golden Dawn called the Sphere that will try to take it over in a decade. Each initiation ceremony opened a sphere for the student, which meant a set of skills to be acquired and theoretical knowledge. The advance was then a symbolic movement up the tree of life. This is interesting too. While you're getting information about, the nature of reality and all this deeper esoteric information, they're also pointing you onto life skill activity. So, they're going to make one person focus very heavily on language. They're going to make another person study very heavily on music. This is how the school is identifying types that they're running across and how they can bring their abilities to the fore. And so a lot of the arts and sciences get included in the talents, the inner talents, and the latent things that they want to bring out and make them manifest. The second or inner order is called the Order of the Rose of Ruby and Cross of Gold, using the first order's knowledge but approached its practical applications lightly. A practice was developed leaning on the knowledge gained in the outer order to assist the initiate in the spiritual path to explore and fulfill their will. The third order, referring to the secret chiefs, these were entities probably human, but not incarnated. Contacting them was part of the work of the second order. It's interesting because... So, you hear me say it a lot, like I don't call on ghouls and goblins, I don't talk and converse with the other side. I have had my interactions with the other side, so probably more so than anyone that we've even talked about tonight. But with that being said, I'll just say this. If you want to know more about the interconnections between the UFO file and the black, the black operations and, the entire, technological, technocratic slavery system that we're being inducted, into, I would strongly suggest that you look into this individual, dark journalist, and you watch his thousands of hours of content that's available. He's been posting for several years now. I think it's 5 or 7 years or something like that. But, he does his homework. He doesn't just come on here and willy-nilly, okay? He talks about characters that have played out in history concerning the mystery schools and, what those end results look like. So you can find him here. This is his YouTube here, right? But you can also go visit his website, which is here. Okay, and here we'll zoom in a little bit. There we go. So you can see he's got quite a bit of information. And from what I can see, doesn't charge for it. It's all freely available, and you can send him super chats and stuff like that, but it's not required. He's not, twisting anyone's arm like, I'll tell you this, or you buy this book, or none of that nonsense that goes on with something. So, it's very interesting, and he's got an email you can sign up for. But, when we talk about Hermes Trismegistus, okay, he was known as Hermes the thrice greatest, okay? And here's an actual depiction of him. We get this from Crystal Links. Anybody can look this up. Crystal Links is pretty decent for basic general understanding. He was also known as Mercury, okay? He was also known as Thoth in the Egyptian, okay? Other similar synchronized gods include Serapis and Hermetic. Okay, so
when it comes to the Greek side of things, right, he was considered the god of wisdom and astrology and alchemy. It's like this guy had it going on. He broke down the guidance of souls in the afterlife in some of his books. I mean, just a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff, right? You see, this is all the stuff that they have in regards to him, so you can go look that up if you choose to. Now, this individual, Hermes, had several different ways that he was described, okay? Let's see. Hermes, however, does, this is under mythology source, have few sources that clarify details of how he looked, okay? These few descriptions not only give us a clearer picture of what the god was believed to have looked like, right? But also his role in both the pantheon and the beliefs of the Greek and Roman peoples, okay, which heavily influenced, the Greek especially, heavily influenced with their, you know, their festivals and their pagan holidays and everything that went on, their sacrifices and all their rituals that they did, okay? All was, you know, surrounded around the Greek, okay? So Greek is like the oldest writing, you know, like a lot of people think the Hebrew language is, you know, like when it comes to like biblical accuracy and everything else is like the standard, but that's not correct. The Greek is, hold on a second, let's fix this. So you guys can see me a little better. Yeah, so the Greek, ancient Greek, if you were to translate ancient Greek the way that it's translated, you would have a totally different opinion on the Bible and what you think you read in it. It's a whole different story than what they've, you know, captured as a fairy tale and led us to believe. All right? And I'll be getting more into that in the future. I'm going to be breaking down, well, I guess we'll start with the book of Revelations, you know, and we'll work our way backwards from there. But we're definitely going to start with the book of Revelations. I'm going to break that down. We're going to go to the original meanings of the words. And we're also going to talk about the interpretations of all the different revelations and apocalypses and, you know, Armageddons and all the good stuff. We're going to break all that shit down. Because I've studied it. And I know what I'm talking about. So, all right, so he says, let's see, there are some exceptions, though, All right, so, of the messenger God, then, were the norm. Let's see. Where does it say his actual features? So I know it does here. All right, so Homer, for example, emphasized the god's youth. In the Odyssey, he described the god as in the lovely spring of life, even detailing first down upon his lip. Now, like the original translation of that in Greek is not that. I know that for a fact. It means something totally different. It means something about going into the spring of life through action. Intention of action. Lovely spring of life, right? And the first down upon his lip, I'm not even sure. I think that's pharmacology is what that is. There was drugs involved, and there always was. Latin writers often took more liberties with their flowery and poetic descriptions of both people and places. Hermes was described as being both young and beautiful in more specific terms. Apuleius, for example, emphasized the god as radiant, with golden blonde hair that hung in locks, highlighted by golden wings affixed to his temples. And you see a lot of photos that look like that, right? Ovid took this description even further, describing Hermes as a somewhat vain god, okay? In Metamorphoses, the poet declared that the god had such trust in his good looks, but conceded that he had every right to be confident in his beauty. Still, Ovid said the youthful god took great pains to emphasize his appearance. So, he was, you know, that's what he did. He was entrancing people with his presence. That's what he did. Ovid's Mercury, the Roman name for Hermes, took the time to smooth and style his hair. His clothing, appropriately regal for a god, was meticulously clean. By the Roman era, the image of Hermes as the youngest of the gods had become their standard, but the youthful beauty of Hermes was not the only way he was depicted. Okay? And it goes on to some other stuff depicting him and breaks it all down. But let's keep it moving here. Now, the ancient Egyptians called him Thoth. Okay? And you see here's his name in Greek. Okay? Egyptian. And he is like the abyss. Okay? As you can see here in his photo, he looks like a bird with a long beak. Right? You see he's got the staff, he's got the ankh, right? But this is all the beginning of Hermetica and Hermes. And this is where it all came from. Okay, this is the depiction. Okay, Thoth played many vital, prominent roles in Egyptian mythology, such as maintaining the universe and being one of the two deities, the other being Maat, who stood on either side of Ra's solar bark. In the later history of ancient Egypt, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes, the arts of magic, the system of writing, and the judgment of the dead. Now that was Hermes. That was Thoth. Okay? And there's more details. You can look it up on your own. But the reading that got me started with all of this, like, I read it when I was incarcerated in state prison. It was called the Kabbalion, and it's the story of the three initiates. Okay, and basically it breaks down the 7 Hermetic principles. But before it does that, like, and we talked about that. That's how I opened this up with Mark Passio, you know, summary presentation of, you know, the 7 Hermetic principles plus the missing one, care, right? We talked about that. But if you go and you watch any documentaries or audio books or anything along the lines of the Hermetic principles from the Kabbalion and the 3 initiates, they're very specific with certain words. And I'm going to bring that up here so you guys can see, okay? Very, very specific with certain words, okay? Here we have page 20, okay, of the Kabbalion, okay? And we'll start here, which says, but there are always a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. Okay? These are the people from the ancient mystery schools who had the intention of handing the knowledge over to the people. Okay? That's who he's referring to. Alright? And this is where it gets real important, okay? And this is where the 8th principle, the principle of care, is actually like introduced in this writing on a much higher level, right? It says, and thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. But it is not found in books to any great extent. It has, let's make it bigger so you can see. I want to make sure you guys see this. It's as big as it's going to get. Let's get me out of the way so you guys can really see what I'm talking about here. Click. Boom. Okay. So this is Internet Archive. You can look up books here. It's a very good place to go. Learn. Okay. If you don't have access to the actual hard copies, you can read plenty of books that are available. Okay, so it says, but it is not found in any books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. Okay? This is, and it's not just, go ahead and put me back up here real quick. Hold on. it's not just lips to ear. This is through action, through being present with the individual, the student, and the teacher being present with each other. That's how these things come about. That's how it's witnessed, okay? That's how dark occultism is taught, and that's how light occultism is taught, okay? By example. Okay, so if you, in your formative years, are being taught a bunch of shit, okay, master the student, okay? The student can rebel, but more than likely, the student will fall down the path. Fall hard on the left or hard on the right. And either way, that's total darkness. And I can say that from experience. I know what the total darkness part looks like. I've been there. Okay? When it was written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it right. This was made necessary in order to avoid the persecutions of the theologians of the Middle Ages who fought to keep the secret doctrines, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you get it. That's where this comes from. That's where all of it comes from. Okay? You also have what's called the Emerald Tablet, which is a great read. Some people refer to it as the Philosopher's Stone. Some people refer to it as the Tabula. Let's try to say this. Smaragdina. I think it's Smaragdina. Smaragdina. Tabula Smaragdina. And it's margarine table, right? The emerald tablets. Okay. This is a foundational text. All right, so I'll do this little reading here so you can get the idea of what I'm talking about with this, right? It says, "'Tis true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is that like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracle of only one thing. And as all things have been and arose from one by the meditation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon is its mother, the wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse." Okay? We're talking about the soul and its development here. Okay? Finding what's ideal to you, finding what your purpose is, okay, and following through with that. God, it's so important. I just wish people could see that their actual existence has a major impact on all existence. The Father of all perfections in the whole world is here. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with the great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. By this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So was the world created. From this are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means is here in this. Hence I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. Okay, so he goes on and on. It's a very long and difficult read if you're not familiar with this type of text. Okay, my suggestion is that you take the time to familiarize yourself with these type of texts by watching other people talk about it. Okay, so this is Thoth the Atlantean. There's another depiction of him there, right? But this is how it all starts. It talks about Thoth the Atlantean, blah, 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 eon to eon, dark to light, Chem meaning black earth, blah, 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 left behind. He says, betray not my secrets, you know, like, because the plan is to have all this stuff unfold over lifetimes, many, many lifetimes. And that he would return after death, from beyond death, that will return, rewarding or punishing as ye have requited your trust. Okay? That means how you used your intentions. Great were my people in the ancient days, blah, blah, blah. Power drawn from eternal fire, thought me. 10 islands, mouthpieces, dweller of Unal. Must be a babe, child, and a man, consuming flame. Children of light will not harm. Alright, so this is where it gets good. And I want you to hear this part. I'm going to read it. So he says, naught desired I but the attainment of wisdom. Okay? So the desire is for wisdom. He says, until on a great day the command came from the dweller of the temple that I be brought before him. Few there were among the children of men. Now, isn't this interesting that they use these concepts of children of men, children of God, all this stuff? This is just like the Bible and how that's written, right? This is the origins. Who had looked upon that mighty face and lived, okay? For not as the sons of men, okay, sons of men, there we go again with that, right? For not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not incarnate in a physical body. That's what they were talking about with the Great White Brotherhood. Okay? So we're going to keep moving here, right? Another great reading and text that you might want to get involved with concerning Hermes is the Corpus Hermeticum, okay? This is a lot different than any of his other readings that you'll get involved with, okay? He talks about actual rituals, actual breakdowns, terminologies. So, you know, and he breaks down the whole universe. He answers all the questions. So, like, he says, and yet the cosmos is a body. It is a body. And one that's moved assuredly. You know, like he's answering questions from the students, right? And, you know, this is just one example of all the different stuff that's in here. We'll go to this one here, the Sacred Sermon, okay? There arose 4-footed beasts and the creeping things and da-da-da-da-da. I mean, it's just, like, I will say this. It's an interesting read, okay? It's a very interesting read. It goes back to a lot of science. It opens the doors to alchemy. It opens the doors to basic chemistry, okay? And it also has in it the handiworks of, let's see, the handiworks of philosophy. Like philosophy for the first time before ancient Greece. You know, during ancient Greece, I should say. But before as well. Because he was the first, right? This is the man who sat down and gave it all. Gave it all. He says, so down to earth he sent the cosmos to the free and divine man. A life that cannot die, and yet a life that dies. And over all their lives of the cosmos, too, did the man excel by reason of the reason, logos of the mind, right? So we can only excel by using our mind. That's what he's talking about, reason in this one. But this is a great read. I would highly suggest for whether you consider yourself advanced or if you consider yourself to be novice or amateur or an initiate, that you look into this information. I personally do not do any of this stuff. I do not practice any of this. I do not take any of the rituals or any of the things that were written out by any of the offshoots or the actual Golden Dawn itself. Okay? Get into that a little bit here. Alright. It's the different stuff for Hermes. Right. So we'll go here. Right. We'll go to Golden Dawn. because this is something that I do not partake in. I understand what these symbols mean, and I understand why the colors are the way that they are, and the thelema concepts that were incorporated into this, and the paganism, and the Greek, and the Roman, and all the good stuff, and definitely the Rosicrucian, and what he was talking about, considering the Samuel Litters Matthews right here, Liddell Matthews. That's what Dark Journalist was referring to. Okay, so that's him there. Okay? It's a lot of stuff, man. You know, like, I give you like a gist overview, but in all reality, this is the kind of thing that we do not have the time in this lifetime to focus on this now. Okay? It's not important. What they carried from lips to ear, the most sacred part of it, is the principle of care, your intentions. Okay? You could create, if you had the greatest of intentions, you could create your own magic. And if you can get it to play out within physics and chemistry on this planet, in this dimension, it would work. And you could call that a religion, you could call that a ritual, and you could do that over and over again. Okay? It doesn't have to follow this script. This is what I'm trying to say to you. Okay? The only part of the script that the Golden Dawn even incorporated into their stuff that makes any difference whatsoever is the Hermetic principles. The 8 Hermetic principles. The 7 that they tell you about in open history, and the 8th, which is hidden. The other thing that I would consider looking into, if I was interested in this content, is I would definitely check into the 8th sphere work cited by Dark Journalist with Steiner and the Harmonic Forces, okay, and the Belial group, and the group of the White Brotherhood and Amelia's. These are the only things I would focus on. Understand this part of it, and this is the most important part. All of your major religions today, all of your major theologies and theosophies and everything that you have mystically read in today's society, everything that has been done to us, everything that occurs in this universe is based off of the Hermetic principles. There's no getting around it. They didn't want you to know this knowledge because the more positive intention and energy and resources and mental constructs and, you know, manifestations of mind and body that you put into this spiritual conception of care with intention, it makes you very powerful, you know? And at the end of the day, if something doesn't seem to initially work out in some kind of way that you would expect the universe to react to your good intentions, you have to understand that the time is nil. The time doesn't exist, and that once the intentions are set, once the ideal is placed, once the word is spoken, once the spell, the magic, the anti-sorcery has occurred, it is done. Stay tuned, man. We're going to keep breaking shit open. And I want you all to stay tuned. Thanks for joining me. If you like this content, you ain't got to buy shit. You ain't got to subscribe to nothing and pay nothing. Hit the like button, share it with your friends. Follow.
to show what it feels like, what it felt like, the roots from me, the reason why I do it. There's nothing to gain for me personally, except for maybe the enlightenment of others to turn more for involution, which would create the proper evolution that our species needs to go through. Well, I wish you love. I wish you freedom. I wish you the truth. Yeah. Don't give up, guys. It's getting close. Notice that all the topics are like, the duality is like so extreme. It's like so far this way versus so far that way. And it's morality right in the middle. So stick with your guns, like, pardon the pun, but stick with your intuition, man, of what's right and what's wrong in most situations. Act accordingly.
In a vision deep with a mystic quill, writing down the fate, the chapters he would fill. Heard the trumpets call, the end is to begin. John the Revelator, the tales of sin. He sees it all. The skies unfold, the story to be told in the pages of old. Wrote the book of the seven seals. For the bones, for the bones. As the angels told, heaven's voice is told, the prophecy revealed, with a pen of light so real. Tell me who's that preaching John the Revelator? Who's that teaching John the Revelator? Tell me who's that speaking John the Revelator? Spoke the words to break the seal. For the bones, for the bones. Feeling the roll of the thunder's toll. John the Revelator. Tell me who's that preaching John the Revelator? Who's that teaching John the Revelator? Tell me who's that speaking John the Revelator? Spoke the words to break the seals. For the bones, for the bones. Feeling the roll of the thunder's toll. Hear the winds whisper, the echoes in the night. Pages turning swiftly in the candlelight. Shadows dance on walls by the fire's might. John the Revelator revealed the final sight. Sings of beasts and crowns of cities that will fall. Tales of seals and trumpets stood mighty and tall.
Right,